They never saw it coming. A single moment of disrespect, quick, casual, dismissive, set off a chain reaction that would ripple through boardrooms, banks, and billionaire circles. But for one man watching from the corner of a cold, tiled floor, it was more than just business. It was personal. What happened in that quiet bank lobby would change lives and legacies forever. The morning had started like any other for Vernon Tate. A retired factory worker, he carried himself with quiet dignity. Clean jeans, a buttoned-up flannel shirt, a cap that read Detroit built. His brown hands, marked by time and labor, held an envelope tightly as he walked into the gleaming marble entrance of Fairstone Private Bank. Vernon didn't know much about stocks or digital banking apps, but he knew what trust meant. His son, Elijah Tate, America's youngest black CEO of a publicly traded tech firm, had told him to walk in and finalize the verification so the family trust could begin moving assets. "Just hand them your ID and the letter I wrote," Elijah had said. "They'll take care of the rest." But the moment Vernon stepped to the front counter, he felt it: judgment. The bank manager, Kenneth Bright, glanced at Vernon like he'd wandered into the wrong building. A thin man with manicured hands and a silver nameplate that read Vice President Wealth Division, Kenneth barely concealed his irritation. "Yes," he said sharply, his eyes darting past Vernon to the glass doors, as if expecting someone more suited. Vernon politely extended the envelope and his worn leather wallet. "My son told me to bring this. It's for a trust fund." Kenneth didn't take the envelope. Instead, he sighed and held out his hand lazily. Vernon placed the ID card gently into Kenneth's palm. For a brief moment, their hands touched, and Kenneth pulled back like he'd been burned. The old man stood silently as Kenneth opened the letter. Read the letterhead bearing Tate Technologies Inc., and then scoffed. He looked at the ID again, then at Vernon, then back at the ID. "This is your ID?" he asked, voice sharp. "Yes, sir, that's me." Kenneth gave a dry laugh. "We get people trying to pull this kind of thing all the time," he muttered. Then, without warning, he tossed Vernon's ID on the floor. Tossed it, as if it were garbage. The ID skidded across the polished floor and landed face down near the waiting area. "Sir," Vernon said quietly, eyes wide. "Why did you?" "I'm going to need you to leave before I call security," Kenneth interrupted, adjusting his tie. "Impersonating a trust beneficiary is a federal crime. This isn't the kind of bank you're used to." Silence. People turned to look. A child stared. Vernon just stood there, stunned, humiliated. He bent down slowly and picked up his ID. And in the far corner of the bank lobby, standing silently in a tailored charcoal suit, was Elijah Tate. He had watched the entire thing. Unannounced and unrecognized, he had entered through the side VIP entrance to surprise his father. He had been on the phone with legal counsel, finalizing the last step in a multi-billion-dollar partnership deal between his company and an international investment firm. One that involved Fairstone Bank as the custodian. But in that moment, every thought left his mind, except one: they disrespected my father. Elijah stepped forward, voice calm but sharp. "Sir, that man you just insulted, that's my father, Vernon Tate." Kenneth looked up, confused. "And you are?" "Elijah Tate, CEO of Tate Technologies." Kenneth froze. "And as of right now," Elijah continued, pulling out his phone, "I am withdrawing every asset tied to this bank. That includes the $5 billion merger Fairstone was supposed to oversee. Wait, Mr. Tate, let's not be hasty. I didn't know. You didn't care to know. Elijah interrupted. And you threw my father's ID on the floor. A hushed silence fell over the lobby. Kenneth stammered. Mr. Tate, this is a misunderstanding. I can assure you. You can assure me of nothing, Elijah said coldly. We'll be moving our accounts by the end of the day. Enjoy explaining that to your board. He turned to his father, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. Let's go, Dad. As they walked out, Elijah could feel the heat in his chest. Not anger, something deeper. The fire of every moment he'd faced that same kind of judgment on his way to the top. And now, they'd tried it with his father. But this was just the beginning, because Elijah wasn't done yet. He had plans, ones that would expose more than just a rude bank manager. He would shine a light on a system that quietly, arrogantly, destroyed dignity under the mask of professionalism. And when he was done, the whole world would see it. Elijah didn't speak a word as they left the building. His father walked beside him, quiet, his ID card now tucked safely into his back pocket. But his shoulders were slouched, not because he was tired, but because of something heavier, something invisible. Outside, the sun was shining, but Elijah's mind was storming. He had built Tate Technologies from the ground up, pitched investors who barely looked him in the eye. Attended meetings where people assumed he was the assistant, not the founder. He'd smiled through all of it, learned to navigate the stares, the whispers, the subtle gatekeeping. But today, this wasn't subtle. This was bold. This was normalized disrespect. He opened the car door for his father. You okay? Vernon nodded slowly. I'm fine, son. Just embarrassed, that's all. Elijah sat behind the wheel, started the engine and drove. But his mind wasn't on the road. It was 5 steps ahead. We're not just pulling our money, he said. We're going public with this. Vernon frowned. Son, it's not worth all that. Elijah looked over. It's exactly worth all that. He drove straight to the downtown office of his legal team, where a crisis response group was already assembled. His PR director, Samira, was waiting in the conference room. You serious about this? She asked. I want everything documented. I want that bank manager's name. I want a timeline. I want to go on the record. Within 2 hours, the Tate Technologies Twitter account had posted a short, respectful statement. Today, the father of our CEO, Mr. Vernon Tate, was publicly disrespected and accused of impersonation inside Fairstone Private Bank. Mr. Tate's ID was thrown on the floor. Effective immediately, we are terminating all dealings with Fairstone and encouraging others to reflect on what professionalism truly means. They didn't need to name Kenneth. The internet would find him. By nightfall, the hashtag #IDonTheFloor was trending. Influencers, entrepreneurs, and everyday citizens began sharing their own quiet humiliations. Stories about being ignored, questioned, belittled in places they had every right to be. The floodgates opened. People didn't just care. They were angry. Meanwhile, Fairstone scrambled. Internal emails leaked. Executives panicked. Kenneth Bright was suspended pending investigation. But it was already too late. The story had reached news desks, and Elijah was scheduled to appear live on primetime TV the next day. Back at his penthouse, Elijah sat across from his father, who watched the chaos unfold with tired eyes. This got bigger than I expected, Vern muttered. Elijah leaned forward. This isn't just about us. It's about every person who's been made to feel small in a place that's supposed to serve them. Verna nodded slowly. I just didn't think people would listen. They didn't before, Elijah replied. But now, they have to. Later that night, Elijah called Marissa, the lead partner at Horizon Capital, the firm he was closing the $5 billion deal with. Still want to move forward? He asked bluntly. Marissa hesitated. We've got the board meeting in the morning. Some people are nervous. Nervous about what? He asked. That this whole situation is too hot. That it's messy. Elijah didn't flinch. Then maybe they're not the kind of people I want to partner with. There was silence. Then Marissa's voice softened. I'll fight for the deal. But it has to be clean. No lawsuit. No media circus. He considered it. Then said, Marissa, if they ever treated your dad like that, would you stay quiet? Another pause. Then, I'll talk to the board. The next morning, Elijah walked into the news studio wearing a dark navy suit. His phone buzzed. Samira's text viewership projected at 3.2 million. He stepped onto the stage. The anchor welcomed him. Elijah, thank you for being here. Thank you for having me. You could have stayed silent. You're a CEO. You have leverage. But you went public. Why? Elijah looked into the camera. Because silence is what keeps this kind of thing going. I didn't do this to hurt the bank. I did this because my father, who worked his entire life so I could get where I am, was disrespected in a way that no man should be, that no person should be. The clip went viral, more than the tweet, more than the hashtag. It was his calm voice, his measured words, his truth. Back at Fairstone, Kenneth sat in a dark office, watching the screen. His face was pale, because what he'd thought was a simple act of dismissal had become a movement. But Elijah wasn't finished. He had one more surprise, and it was going to shake the industry to its core. 3 days after the incident, the world was still watching. Every media outlet had picked up the story. Think pieces, reaction videos, op-eds, and corporate statements were flying across the internet. But Elijah Tate had stayed quiet, not because he was hiding, but because he was planning something far bigger than a TV interview. He wasn't just pulling out of Fairstone. He was going to replace them. Back in his office, Elijah stood before a wall-sized digital map of underserved cities across the U.S. financial deserts. Places where major banks had pulled out years ago, leaving people with check-cashing shops, predatory loans, and ATM fees that ate through groceries. These are the places they ignored, Elijah said, pointing. Samira nodded. And these are the ones where Fairstone just closed branches in the past 12 months. He stared at the data, jaw tight. Then we're going in. You want to start a bank? She asked. No, he said. I want to build a platform, one that works for people like my father. Clean, transparent, dignified. Let Fairstone watch what real inclusion looks like. She grinned. Let's shake up the system. That same day, Elijah called a press conference. Cameras snapped. Microphones pointed. He stood in front of the Tate Technologies headquarters, his father seated behind him in the front row, looking proud, but overwhelmed. Elijah began. 3 days ago, my father was disrespected at Fairstone Private Bank. But what happened to him is part of a much larger pattern. Millions of people in this country are quietly devalued every day. They walk into banks, hospitals, offices, and get treated like they don't belong. He paused. I built a tech company to solve problems. Now I'm building a financial platform to solve this one. Today, we're launching Bridge, a modern, human-first banking experience designed to serve the communities traditional banks abandoned. The crowd erupted. Reporters shouted questions. Stocks surged. And Fairstone, their board was livid. Within 48 hours, their PR team released a statement. Vague, cold, full of, if any offense was caused, language. But the internet wasn't buying it. Screenshots of Kenneth Bright's social media started circulating. Old posts, subtle jokes, connections. By the weekend, Kenneth's name was everywhere. And that's when the final blow landed. An anonymous email hit Elijah's legal team. Subject line: internal complaint records, Fairstone Bank. It was from a whistleblower. The files were damning. Kenneth had a pattern. At least 5 documented complaints from clients and employees of color. All swept under the rug. HR reports marked, handled. One woman even wrote, "He asked me whose card I was really using." Elijah reviewed the documents, his hands shaking. Not from anger, but from validation. He hadn't imagined it. His father wasn't the first. "This is systemic," he said to his attorneys. One of them nodded. "It's a culture, not just one guy." They drafted a letter. Not a lawsuit, but a public demand. Fairstone must release a formal apology to Vernon Tate, publish their internal bias training protocol, and suspend all staff involved in past complaints pending third-party review. They gave Fairstone 48 hours. The world waited. Meanwhile, Bridge's pre-registration site went live. It crashed in 6 minutes from traffic. Thousands of people were signing up. Back in his home office, Vernon watched the numbers scroll on the screen, jaw open. All this because of what happened to me. Elijah sat beside him. No, Dad. All this because of how they treat people like you. Vernon was quiet for a moment. Then said, "Your mom would have been proud." Elijah smiled, eyes glistening. "She still is." That night, Fairstone's board caved. They released a rare full-page apology in the Wall Street Journal, naming Vernon Tate by name. Kenneth Bright was relieved of duties. Their internal review process was open to the public. But the damage was done. Elijah didn't cheer. He didn't dance. He simply walked to his father's house the next morning, handed him a tablet, and said, "Click here." Vernon clicked. His face lit up. On the screen, in bold text, was the new mission statement of Bridge. Every person deserves respect when managing their future. Whether you wear a suit, a uniform, or overalls, you belong here. Vernon whispered, "That's beautiful," and Elijah just smiled, because he knew this was no longer just about revenge. This was a revolution. A month had passed, but the ripples hadn't stopped. Bridge was no longer just a financial platform. It had become a movement. From college campuses to barber shops, people were talking. Not about the money, not about the merger, but about the moment. A moment when a man chose to honor his father in the most powerful way possible. Elijah was in New York now, preparing to ring the opening bell at the stock exchange. Bridge had been granted fast track approval thanks to early partnerships and a tsunami of public support. Over 2 million users had signed up. But he hadn't forgotten why it started. He stood in the green room, adjusting his tie, while Vernon sat beside him in a brand new Navy suit Elijah had surprised him with. "You really want me up there with you?" Vernon asked. "You're the reason this exists," Elijah said. "Of course I do. When the time came, they stood together as the bell rang. Cameras flashed. Applause echoed, and somewhere in the chaos, Vernon quietly wiped a tear from his eye. But the most powerful moment happened off camera. At a private boardroom meeting later that afternoon, Elijah met with executives from 4 major banks. Yes, including Fairstone. They came not to compete, but to learn. Bridge had exposed a weakness in their systems. And Elijah, he was extending something rare, a path forward. He stood at the head of the long glass table. "This isn't about embarrassing anyone," he said. "This is about improving everything. Bias isn't just moral, it's costly. You lost $5 billion in 2 hours because someone made a snap judgment. They listened, really listened." One executive, a woman from Fairstone, finally spoke. "Your father, how's he doing?" Elijah smiled. "He's doing fine, finally getting the recognition he deserved long ago." Later that week, Elijah was invited to speak at a leadership conference. Not about tech, not about money, about character. He opened with a photo of his dad from 1982, covered in grease, standing outside the Ford factory gates. "This man worked 12-hour shifts for 30 years, Elijah said. "I never asked for handouts, never complained. The only thing he ever wanted was respect." He paused. "And when someone threw his ID on the floor, they didn't just disrespect him. They disrespected all of us." The audience stood. Some wiped their eyes. But for Elijah, it wasn't about applause. It was about building something that would last. Not in dollars, but in dignity. 3 months later, Kenneth Bright applied for a job at a mid-sized mortgage company. He didn't get it. His name had become shorthand in business schools. Don't pull a Kenneth. Meanwhile, Vernon was living quieter days. Gardening, volunteering at a local shelter, telling neighbors about his son, but always humbly. He never bragged, except when he was asked to speak at the opening of the First Bridge community branch. A sleek, people-first banking hub built in the very Detroit neighborhood he once walked to work in. There, in front of a small crowd, Vernon stepped up to the mic. "I didn't ask for all this," he said softly, "but I'm proud of my son. And I'm proud that maybe, just maybe, folks will be treated a little better when they walk through these doors." The room clapped, not just for the man on stage, but for every parent, grandparent, and ancestor who paved the way and never got thanked for it. Elijah hugged his dad afterward. "You did good, old man. I raised you right, didn't I?" Vernon said with a smile. "You sure did." That night, father and son sat on the porch watching the sunset. No headlines, no cameras, just peace. And Elijah realized something he hadn't said out loud until now. "Dad, I didn't build Bridge for investors." Vernon looked over. "I built it for you." A long silence. Then Vernon's voice cracked just a little. "I know, son, I know. And that's the story of how a careless act of disrespect turned into a national wake-up call and a revolution of dignity, honor, and justice. Because sometimes one moment is all it takes to change everything." If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Live Truths. We bring you real, powerful stories that open hearts, start conversations, and leave a lasting impact. Your support helps us keep telling what others are too afraid to say. So hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, this is Lived Truths, where real stories find real voices.